Hello, everybody. George Bliss here, 16-inch Softball Hall of Fame media member. I have a treat for you today. Don DeBat, a great author and softball legend, recently did a radio interview on WGN with Rick Kogan. The subject at hand is 16-inch softball has literally been kicked out of Grant Park. And who's going to replace it? Racing cars are going to tie up our city for weeks on end. NASCAR is coming to Chicago. 16-inch softball is kicked out of Grant Park. But there's a lot more to it. I'm going to come back later in the broadcast and tell you about the ideas we have to rename Grant Park after Mike Royko. And also, we want to remember today our great friend Lynn Bramer, who recently passed away. So thank you for tuning in. Listen now to Rick Kogan and Don DeBat on WGN. Play softball. It's the greatest game in America.
One of the great journalists of his generation was Don DeBat, who is still at it. He worked for the Daily News with me for some time, then I think at the Sun-Times for a while. Now you can find him in Skyline, and the latest Don DeBat column is headlined, Cook County Treasurer Pappas refunds $47 million in taxes. That is absolutely meaningless to me because I don't care about stuff like that. What I do care about is softball. And Don's next column should be headlined, Chicago 16-inch Softball Hall of Fame beats NASCAR in Grant Park. Hello, Don. How are you?
Hi, Rick. How are you?
Good. You have been following this typical classic kind of Chicago confrontation where Grant Park, because of this NASCAR nonsense that was, and I still think it's nonsense, that was about to happen, had sort of canceled softball season, and you were justifiably outraged by this, weren't you?
Well, obviously, I played there for 30 years with Mike Royko. For about 15 years with Mike, and I played in Grant Park up to about 2005.
Yeah.
There ought to be a little applause given to this reporter from Block Club, Melody Mercado.
Mm-hmm.
She did the story on this, and it was a great piece. And I read Block Club, and I said, "Wow, I can't believe this is happening."
Exactly.
You get a lot of calls from people. She covers the loop, and that's her beat.
Sure.
So when I learned about that, I jumped on it because I frankly was shocked.
Yeah.
That something like this would happen. I mean, this. First of all, Rick, there's still. Softball is a big game in Chicago. They call it Chicago's game.
Yes.
And there's 100,000 softball players in the Chicago area. I mean, this is still
exactly.
And the fact that I think the Grant Park softball started in 1933.
Wow.
It had to do with the fair that year.
Sure. Century of Progress.
And the Chicago American actually was behind starting it, and that's 90 years.
Yeah.
90 years.
Yeah.
And, to be fair, there's been a long history of the game kind of being squeezed out of Grant Park. It really started with Chicago Fest in the 1980s, and I was still playing there, and we said, we can't play this weekend, we can't play that weekend. And then over the last few decades, there's always another
Lollapalooza. Yeah.
Festivals, and you look at the calendar, and you really can't play there in early April because the fields are in bad shape. You usually get a lot of rain.
Sure.
And I can't tell you how many games Mike Royko and I played on grass out there just to get the season started, maybe in late April.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just. That's what's happening. And then another thing happened. After 9/11, they took all the metered parking away on Columbus Drive.
Right,
so
right.
Walk blocks, lugging bats, balls, and beer coolers. Not that you can't drink in the park, though. But,
so they say, yes. So they say, yeah.
Yeah, no, it was kind of like a Soldier Field. You pop open your trunk and you could park right on Columbus Drive.
And right.
It was parking. We didn't mind paying, a few bucks. And so that was taken away. So I guess NASCAR was kind of the final nail driven into the diamonds.
Yeah. Well, I think it in a way it's a classic Chicago story of this whole notion of Chicago as a world-class city. Chicago is the epicenter of 16-inch softball in the world. And for someone to kind of arbitrarily say, oh, look, oh, my goodness, NASCAR's coming, and not even pay any attention to these thousands, tens of thousands of people who play softball. I mean, the outrage level, I remember reading your column a few weeks ago, and the outrage was really something. You fought City Hall, though, Don. You fought City Hall.
I'm an old enough guy. What can they do to me? Raise my real estate taxes anymore? I don't know. I think, Mayor Lightfoot made a decision, and you have to look at her, where she comes from. She's from Cleveland, isn't she, or something like that? She doesn't understand the game.
Yeah, she's not from here.
You really think about it, there's a birthplace of 16-inch softball.
Yep.
In 1887, was at the Lake Park and 31st Street, not that far at the Surrogate Boathouse, not that far from Grant Park.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've got on the phone someone, Don DeBat, who was, you're in the Hall of Fame, aren't you?
Yes, I am. 1999 as an individual. I'm proud of that. And I got in the year Mike.
Mike Rako's in the Hall of Fame. I got a ton of friends. The Plasek brothers are the Plaseks in the Hall of Fame? Huh?
The Plasek brothers, they played on my teams too.
What about the one and only Len Cudzillo? Is Len in the Hall of Fame?
Lenny is in because in 2008 we brought in as a historic team the Chicago Daily News and the Chicago Sun-Times. 120 guys were in the hall, and Lenny's in the picture along with so many great softball players I can't tell you.
I know. I know. But stay on the phone. Stay on the phone, Don, because we're going to come back and you're going to explain to me, and I'm going to read from what's going to be your next column about how you managed to beat City Hall. It would be vast, and you're also you have a mission. Don has a mission to have the park named Mike Royko Field. We'll be back in 2 minutes. My old friend Don DeBat, who is in the Chicago Softball 16-inch Hall of Fame and should be in any journalism Hall of Fame they have in this crazy town, is a great reporter, writer. Huh?
Hall of Fame too.
Yeah, I don't know.
Rick. Everybody's in, right?
Don has been fighting the good fight about the fact that softball, because of NASCAR and a bunch of other 16-inch softball is getting a rough deal in Chicago. Don writes in his next column that will appear. I guess this will be in Skyline, Don. This next one.
Yeah, Skyline on Wednesday, yes.
Pick up Skyline on Wednesday. Don writes in here, eager for the details of how the 2023 Grand Park softball season will shape up. This writer called the Chicago Park District headquarters for details. Unfortunately, I was put on hold, then switched to various extensions for 33 minutes while listening to cheerful music. He finally was connected to a pleasant woman named Jackie who informed him that 5 leagues are scheduled to play Grand Park 16 Diamonds, blah, blah, blah. He tried to get more information, and he says that this whole thing seems to have escalated into a conversation with the CIA. They really are being secretive about this whole thing, about when you can play, when people can play, and all that jazz. Why is that, Don?
Well, I think the CEO of the Park District, and I'm not going to mention her name, and
Sure.
It comes down from the mayor. They realized that they made a big mistake.
Yeah,
and
right.
This is on the top 5 mistakes made by the city of Chicago in the past decade.
No question.
You could imagine the other ones are, the
Meigs Field, the parking meter deal,
the park meter deal, and
Right.
putting saucer on top of Soldier Field. Okay, so I called, and she said, quote, this is Jackie, we are under a lot of scrutiny. The names of the leagues are confidential. And I said, what?
What? I played in these leagues.
And then she said, for more information, you must file a Freedom of Information Act request.
Oh, how sad.
It takes 2 weeks to do that. But remember, I mentioned that reporter from Block Club. She went and asked questions. I have a printout in front of me. I wish I would have had this in front of me when I wrote that column because I would have sent it in as a graphic. You have to picture this. Here is the document that they sent her back answering her questions, and it's all blacked out. There is no word. I mean, it's all inked out like it's a CIA document. It's like we have some high-level espionage thing going on here, and that's what it is. And, you know, they don't want any information out because they made a mistake.
Yeah, and they won't. Well, they made a mistake. They're trying to rectify it in a sort of ham-handed way. They're going to allow some games there, but in a pinched kind of pinched season with pinched times. They still have no accommodations for parking conveniently around there. You know, it reminds me of the days when Mike Royko's sister Eleanor used to work for the Park District. She'd be spinning in her grave.
I know.
She would. Go ahead.
After I kept peeling the onion here, now, you know, my publisher over at Skyline, he says there's so many profit-making events at Grant Park that the tax-paying Chicagoans have basically lost their recreational front yard for the better part of the summer. This is Ron Rennick.
Yep.
He's a softball player, and it makes him very sensitive to that. And then we also have another layer of the onion. As you keep peeling, remember, you got the events, you got the NASCAR, you got all the big stuff, and under that, you have the social clubs, Chicago Social Sports.
Exactly. The volleyball people.
They're allowed to reserve diamonds before Joe Blow from the Corner Saloon can bring in his team and get some diamonds. I talked to this gentleman who runs the Ad League. It's a co-ed league, and they've been playing there since 1980.
Wow.
And he says, his name is, wait, hang on. I've got so many. But Steve, we'll just call him Steve, okay? He runs the league over there for the advertising league in Grant Park. And Steve, it's Quatt, Kwiatt, commissioner of the Chicago Advertising and co-ed. It's a co-ed league, okay? They told him that they could book 6 games and playoffs for him. But the only problem is he's got to play doubleheaders for 3 weeks. In other words, his entire softball season is compressed into 3 Tuesdays, and then he gets a playoff game after that.
Well, and then he also says in your great column, he says, we're required to fit the games into a 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. time slot. We're being squeezed on both field availability and game time. It is impossible to play 2 7-inning softball games in an hour and a half. He's not wrong about that.
You played softball. You play on the Daily News team, and you know that a game is going to take an hour and a half for one game, maybe, or an hour and 15 minutes at least. So it's ridiculous, And I can't complain. Oh, and they have to pay $1,175.
I know. I saw that too. That's crazy.
Now, we were sponsored by the Billy Goat Tavern and Saloon.
Yep.
Greatest sponsor, football sponsor in the world, Sam Cyanes. We love Sam. We love Bill. We love everybody. I mean, they would give us like $600, and that was all. And that's all we needed. That paid for everything, And then we'd go over there and celebrate after. It's just double what it used to be. And that's not that many years ago, So
I know.
The market, somebody's making some money somewhere, and going back to Ron Rennick, he calls it a scandal. There's money that's being made here, and people are being booted out of Grant Park, who played there for years, and these organizations have taken over.
Yeah, it's shameful, and it is in its way a classic Chicago story. You certainly wish Mike were around to write about this. I mean, Paul Sullivan, who worked with Mike for many years. I'm going to talk to Paul about this. He might, he's out covering, big league ball, as they say. But also, you do, in this column, is also going to mention the fact that Mike Royko, inducted in the 16-inch Hall of Fame in 2000, he played hundreds of games in Grant Park between 1974 and 1983. And when you write wonderfully, Don DeBat, after Mike passed into softball heaven in 1998, in his honor, the Chicago Park District created the Mike Royko softball tournament, which was played at Grant Park for more than a decade. Do you know why that stopped?
Well, Bob Egan, who was the manager of that team that won 5, they played for 10 years. And the Sun-Times team that Bob Egan managed, he's in the Hall of Fame also.
Yeah.
They won out of the 10 years, and the years that they didn't win, he came in. He brought the team in at second. It was an elite team.
Wow.
He said year they just told him, you're going to have to go play at Tilden Stadium. We don't have room for Mike. If they don't have room for the Mike Royko tournament, I mean, it's like
yeah, no, I get it.
I jaw dropped. And it had to do with booking other events and concerts and, the big events,
Yeah.
I remember exactly what it was. Bob would know. But I'd be happy to, you could do another show on this because.
I said no. You're not kidding. I think we should do a whole show about it. I mean, it's a classic, fighting City Hall kind of story. Maybe who knows about this? The new administration. There's bound to be a new head of the Park District. One could imagine, but you make a case in here that you wonder. As does Robert Egan, why the historic diamonds are not renamed Mike Royko Field. That's such a good idea. That is such a good idea. Even last week on the show, Don, I played that amazing 10-minute, you're in it, the 10-minute video of Mike talking about 16-inch softball in the Billy Goat after what has to imagine is a victory. It's one of the great pieces of Chicago I've ever heard.
Every word of that is in the precede of my upcoming book, Chicago.
Yeah, talk to me. Hey,
I got to get the book done.
I know that's a thing, Don. You have been working on this book for some time called Chicago's Game. You're one of the great newspaper men I've known. You were used to writing on deadline. What is it?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm about 75% done, and I had 2 knee replacements caused by softball, and that's 2020 and 2021. I'm walking fine, but I'm going to get that damn book done. Excuse the language. This year, and I think that when you say why should Grant Park's fields be named Mike Royko Field, there's 16 diamonds there. That's ironic because he played 16-inch
softball. Wow.
Mike was a great player. He always put together great teams, and look what he did for softball.
Yeah.
He promoted softball. If it wasn't for Mike, I don't know if WTTW Channel 11 would have hosted the Chicago 16-inch World Series of Softball tournament in 1975. It was on television. It was like a big deal. And we were playing at Soldier Field before it got remodeled.
Yeah.
And they played at the north end. And the other thing Mike did was file that classic lawsuit against the Chicago Park District, our ongoing nemesis, about the use of gloves in 16-inch softball. Now, Royko won the suit, and allegedly he brought in an old West Side ward boss, an ex-16-inch player, an old guy who testified that his name was Bernie Niestein. He's quoted as saying gloves. The only time anybody on our team ever wore any kind of gloves is when they didn't want to leave fingerprints.
Don, it's great. Let's think about doing another show all about softball. I'd love to do it. Hope you and your wife are well. I hope you and your wife are well, and I can't wait for you to finish that book. It is going to be, ladies and gentlemen, when he finishes it, titled Chicago's Game, which it is. Don DeBat, it's always great to talk to you, pal. Take care.
Thank you, Rick.
All right, take care. We'll do this again. Now, that is a great guy. And softball is a Chicago